Hi, guys. Welcome to another episode of Becoming a Professional. I'm your host, Mackenzie Gravett, and I'm joined by my co host, Riley Ramos, for this episode.
Hey guys, happy to be here. So, even though we're doing this episode virtually, I'm actually at the mid-year meeting here in Atlanta. So, you're going to see a couple episodes. We're going to try to change it up a little bit, but yeah, happy to be here. And before we introduce our special guest, let's go through our usual housekeeping. So, this episode is brought to you by the National Chapter of Beta Alpha Psi. Enormous appreciation for their support. They're always here for us when we need them. So always happy to have their backing. Make sure to sign up for the Alumni Member Network if you haven't already. But also, before you sign up, make sure that you're initiated into Beta Alpha Psi so that you can sign up. But when you do, you'll be able to easily connect with us and have that experience with everything the network has to offer. And so, also, disclaimer, the opinions in this podcast are our own and may not reflect the position of Beta Alpha Psi or our respective employers as a whole. Housekeeping? Check. Love it. So, super excited for today's guest as she is an executive coach with an extensive background across various industries. She collaborates with executives at all levels of management to add value to their overall leadership and business strategies. Please welcome CPA, CGMA, Ela Bijlani.
Hi, I'm so excited to be here.
So, just to get some background, where did you go to school and what made you decide to be an accountant?
Yeah, so I actually went to school in Florida. The school is called Florida Atlantic University. I was actually an exchange student. So my backstory is a little different than probably most of yours. Because when I started, I was on a student visa. I had to really support myself through school. When I came to the US, I was just 18 years old. Um, so initially, when I started, I actually wanted to study psychology. But once I realized that in order to really get anywhere, I have to get a PhD, I knew that I didn't really have that much time, considering that I had to support my schooling. So I knew in the back of my mind that I had to get a job after 4 years. And initially, I started actually in a business school. And for some reason, I was good in accounting. So my teachers actually encouraged me to just kind of go on with the accounting courses, which I did. Later on, I was actually invited to join a scholars program at FAU, which was a bachelor's and master's combined. It was an amazing program. They offered the opportunity to teach first year students and also have kind of like a connected pathway into Big Four. But um, back then, I actually had my son back then, and I knew, well, I kind of have to work. So I ended up not going through the program, went straight to work, and finished my 30 additional hours just at night, really. And so, like I said, my path was really, really different, but it still got me to the same result. I still got the 150 hours, got my CPA license while actually working full time and having a 2 or 3 year old child at home.
Oh, wow, that's impressive.
Yeah. But I mean, it really shows that it doesn't matter which way you get there, you can get there.
Yeah, definitely. We definitely have some non traditional students that are also in the Honored Society. I've seen a few of them and met a few of them coming up through the years. And I do not even begin to imagine how you pulled that off. Studying for the CPA while in college was bad enough. So my brother is still in school and has twin 2-year-olds right now and is also working full time. So I give major props to working parents. But what did the initial stages of your career look like after college? So you said you went straight into work.
Yeah. So I started in actually in tax. I was working for it was a regional firm at that point, and I was working in a small office. It was that practice was actually focused on high net worth individuals. But I have to say, tax wasn't for me. maybe it was just that concentration, because the group
Mhm.
that I was working with, it was really just focused on really niche clients. So it really wasn't for me. And at that time, I actually met with a recruiter, and for some reason, he directed me into SEC reporting, and I didn't even know that existed. I didn't know that I can go from tax to SEC reporting. It wasn't an easy switch, but I have to say, if you're going to make a switch, do it early. If you're not enjoying
Mhm.
something, do it early, because the more you stay in something, the harder it is to switch. So I took a job, and somebody took a chance on me, right? Because I had experience mostly in tax and just very different area. And this person decided to train me. She said, well, sometimes it's better to just train somebody the way that I want them to do the job, instead of, getting somebody who's just gonna think they know it all. So she took the chance, and it was an amazing experience. I love the technical accounting because it was challenging. It was I had I
Hmm.
had the opportunity to research, to write papers, to come up with conclusions, and really deal with accounting at a very high level, which later on I found out, like years later, that it was actually my strength. My strength is really not in the day to day. Actually, I find the monthly close a little boring. Like, I prefer the high level, challenging
That's
areas.
fair.
That is definitely fair. I just finished January close.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so I was working, I implemented later on, like, ASC 606, the revenue, the leases.
Hmm.
I dealt with, like, derivatives, equity accounting, warrant valuations. Later on, I was working with equity financings and, like, Goldman Sachs, and really, SEC attorneys. So anything that was challenging, I loved it. There was just like some joy in just finding the right answer. And a lot of times, especially these days, accounting has become very principle based. So you really have to find the right answer for your company. There's not always the one fit all approach, and I really love that.
Mhm.
And then, like, later on, I really felt that in order to progress, I need to develop different skills. I needed to develop more leadership skills, because I thought, okay, well, at some point, I really want to be more involved with people than just the tasks and just the technical piece. And I really noticed that, the people who have the leadership skills and the people skills, they just get so much further. With It doesn't matter at what level they are, they just get further. Especially that I was able to work with really the executive team, and, like, investor relations and attorneys, and I thought, my goodness, it's such an amazing skill to have, in communication, for example, being able to influence people's decisions. So I was like, okay, my next step is really to learn leadership skills. So I was looking for a program, and I actually came across field called coaching. I had no idea what coaching was, but I took a course which led me to hire my own coach, what I loved. And then I signed up for a 1-year program at the University of Miami, finished that. And by then, I think there was like no way to go back. I just loved it so much. And I remember initially when I was in the program, one of my instructors was actually a prior CPA. And I had this struggle of, when you come from the business world, from being an accountant, you always want to provide solutions. Well, in coaching, your biggest asset is really your listening skills and asking powerful questions. And I remember, having this teacher who's telling me, you don't really have to know all the answers as a coach. You just really have to be there, um, for this person, to support them into finding their own answers. And it was a little bit of a struggle at the beginning because I was always like, well, I have to fix this and I have to find the solution and I have to do this and I have to do that. And I really didn't. And I think that there's a huge power in leaders learning that skill, learning coaching skills. Um, so at that point, I was still consulting in the accounting field. And I think the more and more I did coaching, the more and more I realized that this is really what I enjoy doing. Um, so I was doing less and less accounting and more coaching. Um, and then something unexpected happened. So my father, who was actually just 67 years old, he passed away, like went to sleep, didn't wake up. And that was like a wake up call for me. Like, like sometimes we kind of have these calls that like trigger us to make some decisions. And I think that was it for me. I was thinking to myself, well, I wanted to study psychology. I really love this coaching program. I really love how it can change people's perspective and really advance them to the next level. Um, so can I take this chance to really step into something different? And I can't say that I didn't have resistance, Um, being a CPA for so many years, I had this identity of who I was. And I was really attached to that identity.
Mhm.
Um, I didn't want to let go of like the hard work that I put into being who I was. I have to say my ego kind of liked the position that I have, the title that I had, the huge office that I had, the people that I was working with. But I have to say, the more and more I did coaching, the more my heart and my mind were kind of like really separated. Um, so at some point I decided that I have to give it a try, and I transitioned into coaching and really stopped consulting. Even though I was, people that I used to work with, they kept on coming back and saying, well, can you do this? Can you do this? At some point I kind of had to say, no, I'm not going to do that. So one more event I think that really changed my perspective was at some point I was having a coaching conversation with somebody, and this person kept on talking about John Maxwell, and I was like, oh, who's John Maxwell? So I started researching him and went to a conference in Orlando. And I made that decision literally in 3 days. So I showed up in Orlando, and somebody introduced me to the CEO of Maxwell Leadership, Mark Cole. And he was kind of entertained with the idea that I just showed up in 3 days, but I really had this like desire that I just have to be there. Um, so the next day he brought me to stage with John Maxwell, and
Oh,
in front of
wow.
like over 2,000 people. And as I was standing there and saw all these people really excited about learning, I was thinking to myself, well, I think this is my deciding moment. I think this was the moment where I was thinking to myself, well, where can I really impact people's life? I mean, I was, as I was working in SEC reporting, I was sending out the information to the world because I was preparing the forms 10K, 10Q, the 8Ks, like everything was going out to the world, but I wasn't making any impact. But when I was standing in front of over 2,000 people, I knew that I was making an impact, or that I could make the impact. So I think that was like the final straw that really made me realize that life is just too short. I have to do what I really enjoy doing.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I like that. If anything, with the whole, I guess acting as a coach, you're really kind of streamlining the process for your clients, and when it comes to their personal growth. So I feel, and that
Mhm.
also transfers to how they lead their respective companies, entities. That it really, because time is money. It you do anything you can to make things more streamlined and faster. And so that's something that a lot of our students have been trying to figure out. Like, I guess with this younger generation, it's that instant gratification that they want it, but they want it sooner. So it's like we got to be as efficient as possible to get to where we want to be. Now, what is the difference between mentoring and coaching?
Hmm. So in the business world, we have coaching, we have mentoring, and then we also have consulting. So like there are like three concepts that I think sometimes we kind of mix up the definitions. So
Mhm.
coaches are more people developers, and we need coaches in accounting because I think we need to realize that technical skills are not enough to succeed. We
Mhm.
need to develop ourselves. We need to focus on self leadership. And coaches don't tell clients what to do, but they are trained to ask powerful questions. And that's really where I think the more we know where our backstory kind of plays into how we make decisions, the more we can develop and the more we can achieve. Because so the more we know ourselves, the more we can become who we want to be, if that makes sense. So the coach does
Yeah.
not give the answers, but they help you in creating the right path for you. Once again, they don't give you advice. And the fundamental belief in coaching is that the client has the ability to find the perfect answer that works for them. And I'm always amazed, like whenever I'm coaching somebody, and I think in my head that I know the answer. A lot of times the person says something different, and it really has trained me to not assume, because everybody's backstory will create the right path for them. You know, um, so one of the fundamental assumptions in coaching is that the client has all the resources to effectively like achieve goals, and the coaching just activates them. Sometimes we're not aware because a lot of thoughts are just like running through our head, and we're just not aware until really it all comes out. We can organize it and say, okay, what do I want to do with this? Where do I want to get to, and how am I going to achieve that? So coach acts more like as a partner, and a coach also keeps the client accountable to whatever goals the person commits themselves to. Now, mentor is more of a guide. And I think a lot of times in accounting, especially in public accounting, we have this concept of mentorship. But mentor a lot
Mhm.
of times will give the advice based on their own path, right? So if somebody's a partner
Mhm.
right now, we can say, well, how did you get there? What did you have to do? What do I have to do? And we can follow the same path, but not your path doesn't have to be the same as my path. Like because of my circumstances, like where I came from, right? I came from like Poland when I was 18 years old. My path could be different because I had to overcome a lot different adversities than somebody else. So the mentor can give me the path that works for them, but I might have to adjust it, you know? Um,
I see. Okay.
yeah. So mentor always like kind of says, well, I did this, or if I were you, I would do this. Coach would ask a question more like, well, how did it work for you in the past? Where do you want to get to? How can you achieve this? Um, why is this important to you? So it really
So
triggers
it's
the
almost
mentor.
like,
Interesting. Okay.
is it fair to make a comparison to therapy?
There's a difference between coaching and therapy.
Mhm.
So therapy focuses mostly on the past.
Mhm.
Coaching focuses on the future. So you have a goal, you want to get to that goal, and then you are where you are. So what do you need to do to get from where you are to where you want to be? Now the backstory affects us, right? Because we're going to have these limiting beliefs sometimes that are going to prevent us from achieving these goals. And I see this all the time, like highly accomplished people think that they still need to achieve and prove, and it's just backstory. So they affect us. So the coaching is not meant to sit in the past and resolve the issues of the past. The coaching is It's a way of bringing you from where you are right now to where you want to go.
So it's more of like a
So pretty
mindfulness and
much.
kind of trying to figure out
Hmm.
why you make the decisions that you make.
Um, Reflecting is a huge part of coaching.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Well, and
yeah,
I
it is.
guess too with the reflection piece too, you want to be able to kind of figure out your strengths and weaknesses to create those career opportunities or what do, like what your future, what you think your future wants, um, or looks like, and your coach is there to unlock that potential.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, um, definitely because in coaching, you almost untap your potential. For example, sometimes we'll have these like limiting beliefs, or we don't even know what strengths we have, or we'll just
Hmm.
keep on repeating the same patterns that are not really serving us, but we really don't have the time to step back and reflect, well, why am I doing this? This is really not even serving me. Or
Mhm.
does this really help to where I want to get to? Or do I even want to get there? I mean, everybody's doing it, but does that serve me? Or is it the right moment for this right now? There's just so many things that like really when you sit down and unpack what's motivating you, sometimes you make the decisions much faster, you advance much faster because you can say, well, that story doesn't serve me anymore, or that's not true, or I don't even want that, or actually, I can achieve this much faster if I do this.
So that really resonates a lot with me, especially with my career journey thus far. Not that it's been that long, but I went straight into Big Four public accounting. And it took 4 years for me to realize that my motivations in doing that were really because those were the expectations that had been set for me and not necessarily what I wanted to do, right? So I think I was very much in the mindset of like, this is a prestigious job, and it is. And it can be a great career building block. It can be a place to make your career for the rest of your life. But for me and for what I wanted as a recovering people pleaser, it was a recipe for burnout, right? So I would imagine that in coaching, especially given that we've gone through a pandemic in the last couple of years, you've seen quite a few burned out clients.
Yes.
So, can you tell us a little bit about what burnout is and how it happens?
Yeah, so I mean, there's so many reasons for burnout, right? So many reasons. We can say, well, the culture, the manager, I mean, there's so many reasons for burnout. But as I think of burnout, I like to focus on what I can do about it because that's the only thing that
Mhm.
I can control, right? I mean, I'm not going to change the whole company culture by myself. I have to, it usually has to happen top to bottom. One person from the bottom is not going to affect the top. So, so when I think about burnout, and I've gone through burnout myself, um, is I like to focus on really self leadership. And I think a lot of times the burnout happens because of our lack of awareness, because we're not listening to our bodies, because we're not setting boundaries, because we're not living our values, or we don't know our values. A lot of times we really don't. We just go and do whatever everybody's telling us to do, but we don't sit back and say, okay, well, what is this season for? What's important to me? When I was 20 years old and I had my son, I had very different values back then than I have now when he's going off to college. Now I have a lot more free time and I can focus on a lot of different things. And another thing is also perfectionism. I think that industry perfectionism, well, no, detail oriented accountant is very important, but perfectionism goes beyond that. So I remember when I experienced burnout, I couldn't figure out why. I was working at this job and I really liked it. Um, And at some point, it got actually really bad. So later on, when I left, I took one test. It was actually a test called Working Genius. And it really made me realize, and it turned on that bulb for me, why I experienced burnout. And in that particular case, it was because my responsibilities changed. So my responsibilities changed. And instead of working in my zone of genius, which was very
Hmm.
different before, to doing this tedious work that I really was not my strength, I was doing it and doing it and doing it until at some point my body was like, no, this just gotta stop. So I think it's really important to understand ourselves, to be very self-aware, listen to our bodies, and really and really really like reflect when you're going through burnout and you feel like something is off. And I really think that that's where the reflection comes in, and self-awareness.
Are you in my brain, first of all? So, as a coach, you're going to hate the next thing I'm about to say, but
Okay.
this is what I did. And this is what we hope that our students will listen to and avoid even starting in the first place. I set the expectations up here from day one, right? So, I was working at an unsustainable pace. And now, if I stop, all of a sudden it looks like I'm not performing, right? Because I can't sustain that level of just the hours that I'm working, the pace, but it's going to look like I've just dropped off drastically on all of my performance metrics. So I've kind of set myself up for failure, definitely set myself up for burnout. And where do we go from here? Right? So I guess what would you suggest for current college students or really young professionals early in their career to avoid even setting themselves up for this?
I would say focus on knowing yourself first. Awareness is huge, and actually, John Maxwell says you have to know yourself to grow yourself, and it really comes down to focus yourself, focus on finding out what your strengths are, so that you can do the job that you enjoy, and then it's not going to feel like it's a job. There's so many assessments that you can take to kind of figure out, okay, what is my strength? Um, because when you're doing what you love doing, you're not going to feel like you're constantly working, right? And there's so many choices in the accounting industry. It doesn't have to be just tax or audit. Like, for example, just in corporate accounting, you can be general ledger, you can be in financial planning and analysis, you can be in mergers and acquisitions, you can be in operations, you can be in SEC reporting, you can be investor relations, very different job. You can be like an internal audit, which is, it doesn't have to be, 80 hours a week. If you're in a tax
Mhm.
department in a corporate environment, it's not going to be 80 hours a week. So you have to kind of like know yourself. What do you enjoy? Where do you want to get to in your life, right? Because maybe tax is for you if you know that one day you want to have your own firm,
Mhm.
and you want to just transition. So you kind of like, build yourself up, and you grow, and then okay, I have to sustain this because one day I want to do this. um so but really know yourself. Like, I remember when I was a director of SEC reporting at this one company, so I had audit teams coming and working me all the time, checking my work. A lot of times I really had to like teach them how does accounting work, because um there's no time for their managers to train them. I mean, it's a lot of times it's ticking time boxes, but you ask somebody to do a cash flow, they don't know how to do a cash flow because nobody trained them to do a cash flow. So, and I remember this particular person, he loved just the operational piece. Loved it. Talking to people, figuring things out. And he was put into this job where he had to just check the boxes off. And I think after 2 years he left. He couldn't take it anymore. And he went into operations. I mean, that proves to you that there's so many possibilities in accounting. If you're not enjoying something, realize it sooner than later, because accounting is still a great career.
Mhm.
But it just has to be the right match for you, you know? Like, for example, my son now is going to university and he wants to have his own business. And I said, well, you have to know how to run your books, study accounting, you know?
That's fair. That's fair.
Yeah, we get so many
Now,
interns. I work for a school, and we have so many interns that come through our department who are not necessarily interested in being an accountant, but like one that I met wants to run her own hair salon.
Mhm.
So she's going to
oh,
minor in business, and she did the business track in our like CTE program for the high school. And she just decided if she's going to run it, she should probably know how to manage her own books, exactly like you said, so that she doesn't have to rely on someone else and she can pocket more of her own money.
Yeah. I think it's a great choice, and it's a really stable career path. You can always fall back on it if you decide that, you don't want to have that hair salon anymore. You can always fall back. Like, I think it's a great industry and it's given me so many possibilities. To really become who I want to become. Um, but I think it's just really important for students to know that it doesn't have to be one way. You can choose your path.
I agree. Now, Ella, looking back at your career, let's talk about like career milestones. Can you talk about either like your first keynote or your most memorable experience as an executive coach?
Yeah, so I think my most maybe stage time experience, except for that moment with John Maxwell, was I was actually in a stage time competition for Maxwell leadership. So a lot of people just kind of enter this competition, and you get to focus on what you want to present on the stage, and they choose like 10 finalists out of a group of people. So I was actually a finalist. I didn't know back then that I wanted even to be on stage, but it was just amazing. Like, something was pushing me there, and it was an emotional story. So it was really impactful for me to be there and tell that story, because first of all, I got to share it with others, but I also learned from that experience that we get to connect with others by being true and sharing our own experiences. I think a lot of times, in the professional world, we tend to cut off ourselves from our professional selves. And I think that there's a power, even in accounting, even when we get stuck in the numbers and kind of have to cut off from all the emotions and, our lives, to focus, um, to share what we're all about. Um, so yeah, that was really meaningful for me because it was a part of my story and I really wanted to share. And by sharing that, I was able to impact other people who could be going through that experience also. Um, as far as coaching, well, first of all, I have to say that to be a coach, it's a huge privilege because somebody lets you into the world and they really share a lot of times things that they don't share with other people. So coaching is always confidential, and the confidentiality really transfers from accounting really well into coaching, where, like, the confidentiality is just something that's not negotiable. So I find it really honoring, and I think that a lot of times when I see women who are so accomplished, so smart, so talented, and they always focus on the next thing, and they struggle to find their value or confidence to be in this high profile roles. I think that's really what I enjoy, kind of helping them see their true value and kind of stepping back and helping them see how much they actually have accomplished, and really giving themselves credit, because a lot of times when we're these overachievers, we're always focusing on like, oh, what's next? What am I going to do next? But we never really step back and say, well, you know what? I need to step back and see, okay, well, how much I've done. Um, and it's okay to go for the next thing, but you can do it much faster if you actually see your value. So I love that piece.
That's awesome. Do you have any, like, as a mom of a current or upcoming college student, or current?
Upcoming.
Upcoming. So, as a mom of an upcoming college student, do you have any advice for our current students besides call your mom?
Um, it's gonna be a heartbreaking experience for me in July, but do what you know, enjoy. Like just enjoy. Like enjoy studying, enjoy the college experience. I think a lot of times we want to give our kids what we didn't have. So like I had to work while going to college, so I didn't really have that. So I want my son to have that, but um take that time to figure out what is your strength, what you're good at, where your heart just telling you to go. Because, don't just study, but take the time to reflect, to say, okay, why do I like this? What could I do with this? And I think this way you're going to be much happier when you're later on working, because even if you're going to, have to spend a few years to kind of like build up your skills, you're going to know where you're going, you're going to know the reason why behind something, right? It's going to be much easier to kind of just like suck it up and say, okay, I need to do this, to then later on get to that.
I like it. So, where can the people find you for more of this
Yeah,
fantastic
so
content?
I mean, connect with me on LinkedIn. That's always the easiest. DM me if you have any questions. Like I said, if you have any questions, accounting, anything related to personal development, definitely reach out. And Also, I have a website, just my name, elabijlani.com. But just reach out with any questions. I'm really easy to get a hold of, and also, spend time answering any questions.
All right. Well, thanks everyone for tuning into this week's episode. Be sure to like, subscribe, follow us from whatever platform you're tuning in from, and check out our show notes for our various social media pages and official BAP swag, like the sweatshirt I'm wearing.
Oh, she's rocking
Um,
it.
Ella, thank you for guesting on our podcast this week. It was such a pleasure to hear your story. And with that, we'll see you guys on the next episode of Becoming a Professional.
Hey everyone, Riley here with the credits. This episode, titled Coaching Our Future Bosses, was hosted by myself, Riley Ramos, along with my co-host, Mackenzie Gravett, and accompanied by our special guest, Ela Bijlani. The episode was recorded virtually. Music was sourced from Resolute Audio and Fine-Tune Music on Adobe Stock. Huge shout out to Beta Alpha Psi for their financial support and keeping the podcast going strong. If you haven't already, please join the Alumni and Member Network. Details can be found in the show notes. Thanks again for tuning in, and we'll see you on the next episode of Becoming a Professional.